everyone back to our discussion session this week. Really excited based on the conversation that we had last week. The goal now of Ticket Playbook is really to shift and start providing you with playbooks of successful nights or ways that you can plan successful nights. And to Eric's point and the point we made last week of, group sales is really going to have to help be a driver to get us out of this mess when we get back to fans and stands, no matter what our capacity is. And we're seeing this across a lot of different leagues already with the way that, they're coming back with fans in the building. So to take it way back, I think Eric and I probably met in 2006 or 7. I mean, it had been way back.
I was thinking of the day, it was probably 2007.
Probably at an NBA group sales meeting. So I was in Atlanta. Eric at the time was in Phoenix. We were counterparts across the NBA, really trying to drive home group sales. And at the time, he was working in tandem with Bob Hammer, so another connection. It's all a small world. It all comes back. And so we've known each other over the course of time. He actually tried to hire me when he was at the Panthers, and then now here we are, right? Both in different spots. But I know Eric, and you guys have probably maybe heard Eric speak, whether it has been through Sports Business Solution or other avenues throughout our industry. But we wanted to bring Eric on, and Eric and I talked, and Emmanuel, about really putting together, because he's already done this with a couple teams, putting together a playbook for successful mental wellness nights. So how do you do that? What does that look like? I know if I was sitting in your shoes, I'd probably be like, whoa, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to speak on this, but that's why Eric's here. So I'm going to, I guess, get us started and have Eric introduce himself a little bit about what he does now. And then we can dive into this playbook of how you're going to put together a successful mental wellness thing.
Awesome.
Eric, all you.
Thank you. I was joking with Emmanuel and Denise before that. It's ironic that I'm talking on a wellness topic and the lighting in the room makes it look like I'm sick. So I apologize. I'm in a hotel room right now, out of my apartment. So this is the best I can get the lighting to go. Denise mentioned it before. So I only known the sports world up until I had my own mental health crash, is the way I could describe it. But I started at the NBA league office, then went to go be the director of sales and service for the startup WNBA team, the Chicago Sky. That led me to a group sales director position with the Phoenix Suns and Mercury. And that was in 2007 when Denise and I met back then, and she was with Atlanta. I was talking a little bit earlier about the chip on my shoulder, or our collective shoulders, about group sales. It probably doesn't sound like that long ago, but in 2007, the way the industry was working, no one was rising to the level, if you will, of VP of sales and service coming through the ranks of the group sales side of things. And the prevailing wisdom there at the time was the largest revenue generator is season tickets. So we have to promote the people who have the season ticket background. I think for a lot of folks who are on this call, you'll probably agree, and this is not a knock on our season ticket holder account friends, is there's so much to manage on the group sales side of things. It's almost a microcosm of the entire ticket mix between renewals and new sales. And so had an opportunity to go to the New Jersey Devils for 4 years to oversee their sales and service department, and then took a chief revenue officer spot with the Panthers for ticket sales and sponsorship sales. And that was really short-lived. It was only 6 months in that what felt like came out of nowhere, my mental health just took a complete dive, and literally to the point of dysfunction for 2.5 years. Friends who are on this call will know that I disappeared from the face of the earth because I just wasn't functioning. And I'm not going to belabor you all with the long story, other than to say what I learned about mental health coming from that experience is how life experiences, instead of what we think about when we hear mental health, which is this person genetically has this disorder called bipolar or schizophrenia or depression or PTSD. For me, I had an older brother, this will come back to when we're talking about theme nights, who had cancer twice and a number of ailments in between all of those accidents and ailments that ultimately were things that had built up in my central nervous system over time. And the fact that I was so focused and so passionate about sports, playing sports first and then working in sports, that's what led to my ultimate decline, was that I never worked on myself. And so coming back then and making a decision whether or not to come back into sports after I started to feel better and found pathways towards healing, the decision was to go more into the space of mental health, help folks. And so we work with everything from K through 12s to colleges to corporate offices to servicemen and women and first responders. And then the sports team and leagues niche really came about from being reached out to after we were sharing information about what we were doing in these other spaces. And having the group sales background, it gave me an opportunity to work with teams on building group sales nights. And so I won't take away too much, Denise, because I know you got questions in terms of how we get started and thematically why we do what we do. But the interesting thing about group sales nights as it pertains to mental health is there's this kind of thick line between keeping it as a group sales night and limiting it to a certain number of people based not on our work, but the way that society currently perceives mental health versus how we can grow outside of that, make them applicable to way more than the traditional groups you'd think would be interested in mental health nights, teach the arena about this topic, and actually grow it into something much larger than what we traditionally think about when we think about them as group sales nights.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So I think, I'm going to show this. This is not the final draft, but you guys will get the final draft. So just so you know, we have a document, just like we did normal recap notes. I've done the recap notes in advance. Eric and I have worked on putting together kind of a perfect playbook for you. So this will be accessible to you guys, but we're going to talk through some of these points. And at any point that you have questions, just chime in and ask Eric or myself. We're happy to answer. And then for those of you that have worked with Eric already on a night like this, please feel free to chime in and talk about your experience of what's worked and what hasn't worked in your marketplace, because I think that's where we're all going to learn the most from this. But I think to your point, Eric, I think let's start first with the objectives. And you've mentioned a few of them. I think number one, we want to build the best night possible for our marketplace, right? Number two, and this is where I think you should speak, is that we want to educate on exactly what mental health and wellness is so that everyone understands the topic, right? So anything else you want to add to that part of the objectives?
Yeah. So honestly, like if I see Allie's face kind of smiling as I'm saying this, Allie from the Warriors. If I can impress upon anything for the purpose of being an advocate in this space alone, not even related to sports, but then as it pertains to what you all are doing, whether it's something where you want to work with us, great, or something you all want to do on your own, or something you find another organization to work with. My one rallying cry to all of you is please don't lead with the Detroit Pistons mental health awareness night, the Orlando Magic mental health awareness night. Here's my feedback why from traveling around the country and seeing how people receive that term, okay? And again, we're a victim of where our society has developed to, unfortunately, is I do a presentation where at the beginning, I'll ask groups to break up into smaller subgroups. And they'll have those easel boards in front of them. And they have to write on the left side, when they hear the term mental health, think of all the positive word associations that come to mind, write them down in green on the left side. And then the right side, write down all the negative word associations that come to mind when you hear the term mental health. And I've added those up now, 124 different sessions before COVID began. The top 24 terms are all negative. Sick, out of their mind, crazy, mental case, right? And these are not just from like students, these are even from mental health professionals, these different groups that we've done these with. And you think about the juxtaposition of, if you hear the term physical health, and I'm not trying to say this in a cliche way, things you guys have heard before, I'm actually trying to dive deep into the weeds of this. When you hear the term physical health, if you go into a magazine aisle at an airport and you look at a physical health, men's health, women's fitness magazine, you see six-pack abs, you see better sex in 15 days, right? These are all the things that people talk about when we talk about physical health. The second you put mental health up there as the leading driver, here's what happens. 1 in 5 people in our society who have been diagnosed with this thing called the disorder, they listen up and they say, maybe that's a topic for me. If I'm willing to raise my hand and go listen to that topic, I'll come to that night because I want to learn more about it. You also have a small niche of people that I call kind of the future psychologists and psychiatrists of America group. So the people maybe who haven't been diagnosed, but they're gung-ho about it and they're willing to go to it. That means that of the market that you would love to come out to this game, and then the market that we would love to educate about this topic, 80+% hears the term mental health and they go, I'm not going to that. I'm not sitting in that room with people who are labeled that way. I don't want to be labeled that way. That doesn't apply to me. And so from a branding perspective, the reason why when we work with, I see Zach with the Panthers, we called it Same Here South Florida. What we were working on with the Mets, calling it Same Here City Field, right? With the Suns, we just did a virtual event, Same Here Suns. Is Same Here, again, could be that name. It could be something you all come up with and do on your own. But it's meant to say, I face challenges just like you face challenges. We all face challenges. That's what brings us together. On the subheading of that, if you feel the need to include messaging about wellness, mental wellness, to be more descriptive, totally get that. But if you lead with the main title being mental health, what happens is we're going to be caught in that niche. One other thing I'll add to that, just from personal experience, is having a brother I mentioned who had cancer twice. I saw the difference of how he was treated in the late 80s when he got it. I was a much younger kid back then. And then later in the 90s, late 90s, when he got it back the second time. And we all take for granted that we look around baseball stadiums right now and we have 50,000 people holding up a sign that says, I stand up for, and there's the name of the person who's been through something, or Hockey Fights Cancer Night, I fight for, and they have a name across their placard that they're holding up. Cancer was not there 20, 30 years ago, where we're seeing it right now in these stadiums. When my brother had it in the 80s, people were afraid to go near him. His hair fell out. They thought there's something wrong with him. I might get cancer if I get closer. And now you look where cancer's progressed to. The campaign that brought everyone together around cancer was everyone knows someone affected. Once it became everyone and all working on it together, that's what brought everyone together. That's what made cancer the most donated to cause in the world. With mental health, we're at where cancer was, right? Number of decades even ago. Is that when people think of mental health, back to that earlier discussion, they think of mental illness specifically, and they think it's only for this group of people who genetically have these things called disorder. And I'll say, with the experience of the groups that we've worked with, I didn't mention the Cavaliers in there as well, and even the Washington Wizards and Capitals, is when we're starting out these nights, I don't want you to think these grandiose ideas that, like, hey, if we position it this way, immediately we're going to turn on the faucet and we're going to have 3,000 people out for our group night. Not going to happen that way. But looking around, seeing the faces, those of you who've turned your cameras on, but then seeing the names of the folks who are on there and recognize a lot of them, I think the empowering, awesome thing about working in sports and working in groups specifically is working together and saying we have the power to change perception because of the way in which we touch so many fans, that if we think about this topic for a long term, Jordan, I see you you're nodding your head a lot, which I'm excited about, is for the long term, we have an opportunity to work together to say, how do we change the way that society views this topic, which will end up taking this night from a group sales night of 200 people, 220 people, to theme nights of 2,000 people and 3,000 people, and getting season ticket holders to want to support the stuff that you're doing from a theme night perspective. So if there's any way to look at this, is to think of this as, what I'm doing is I'm building a foundation that we can then educate around and grow around, that will allow us to sell more tickets, yes, but it's also going to allow us to condition and explain to the market what mental health even is.
So to get started, Eric, because we talk a little bit about, if we focus on just a specific group, we are going to stay at a smaller base. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but starting at that smaller group, or the group in our market that does, kind of already associate themselves with mental health, is probably a great place to initially start. So can you speak to some of those organizations that would be in most everyone's market that would be great places for us to start building relationships?
For sure. So your like baseline groups to get started in the mental health space are the largest nonprofit national organizations. So I'm sure most of you, if you're coming on this call, you've heard of NAMI, which is National Alliance on Mental Illness. Okay, so that's one group. Another group is called Mental Health America. They have local chapters all over the country. Another group is called Bring Change to Mind. If anyone knows the actress Glenn Close, that's her organization. So these groups have national chapters, and then the national chapters that have local affiliates in them. And they're always looking to do fundraising. They're always looking to create awareness around what they're doing. The challenge with them is, and I'll give a couple more examples in a second. So one's like Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic, if that's in your market, oftentimes have programs that they want to communicate to your fans and let them know that they have resources that are available in your market. So those groups are your baseline groups to start with. The challenge is from a content standpoint, really what you get out of that is you get, maybe if you're lucky, like a doctor that you can get to be on a panel for 30 minutes, right? And you get very baseline conversation. Again, back to, this is how we diagnose depression. This is how we diagnose anxiety. When you have these 5 symptoms of this list of 20 for 2 weeks or more. And so who you bring out year after year when you do those groups and you focus just on that baseline is the content stays the same, number one, but then also they don't seem like there's growth outside of those groups because it's the same groups have been talking about it for a long time. So Denise, hopefully that helped answer your question. Is those will at least help us get to the 150, 200, 250 mark. If we start with those groups, then we'll start to talk about how do we actually build much larger groups around that.
Yeah, and so that's a conversation that you and I had prior to this of saying that, essentially we can say all of us are affected at some point, but that can be if you're sitting, in your seat as a director, or even a sales rep of, trying to put together the site, that can be very daunting. Like, hey, I'm just going to invite everyone. So we talked a lot about, Eric, and maybe you can speak to more of these specifically, of like breaking it down into different categories of like, say, hey, like, how do we talk about social and emotional wellness in school? Like, such a timely topic right now with everything that's going on with schools. How do we focus on servicemen and women? How do we focus on youth sports and the that whole dichotomy of being able to take on the stress of, of sports and school, corporate wellness? Like, can you speak to like how you could include those types of groups and make it applicable to them and the way that you've seen that done?
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the advantages that we have as group salespeople is we've got these existing relationships in the marketplace. So let's use school groups as an example, right? So we just talked about the baseline groups that are the mental health focus groups. So now schools is another area to add on there. Okay, we already do events with schools. We do STEM nights, or we do, educational nights, what have you, right? Different themes that are related to the school, or a pep rally night for a particular school because they're coming on the court or the ice and they're doing the high five tunnel or doing a performance at halftime. So with schools specifically, let's use them as an example. There's a whole nother subset within the schools, which are your therapists, your school counselors, and the folks who are responsible for what's called social and emotional learning. So one of the great things about having done this for the last 3 years, not related to sports, but just related to this topic generally, is, and we did this with the Suns when we did the virtual event recently, is we've got the opportunity, when I come into a market, to say, hey, let's tap into a superintendent, a school guidance counselor, and then someone who's responsible for curriculum implementation at a school. Therefore, now all these schools that are in your market that you already have a contact with about something else that's school related, you can call them up and say, hey, we're doing this social and emotional wellness night that ties into this overall Same Here night. Who would be the right person at your school to talk to, so that, and here's the list of people that we're going to have that are coming out and talking about that. And that can be done in a number of different ways. So I want to be as strategic as possible, so it almost doesn't sound overwhelming. Is typically when I'll come and I'll partner with teams, like what we did with Zach with the Panthers, is we have a session prior to a game where we do what I call kind of culture setting, like table setting, right? So it's very much storytelling that leads to how mental health impacts all of us, 5 out of 5 instead of 1 out of 5. That baseline conversation, then, this is where we were going to when we were working with the Mets, can be broken down into separate subsets within the main event, where you could either do it during this 2-hour period that we're doing prior to the game, or what you could do is you could do the separate setup that we do for an hour, and then you do different breakouts, one for schools, one for offices, one for servicemen and women and first responders. And those 3 breakout groups, we just help facilitate, and I could easily get volunteers in each market. So in the schools, again, it's superintendents, guidance counselors and curriculum implementers. But in the case of offices, it might be an HR director, a CEO, and an employee that's taken on the role of making social emotional health really important, right? So these groups will tie in and will appreciate seeing the content coming for something that's specific to their area outside of just the main piece, which is let's talk about how it impacts all of us, and then feeds out to these kind of separate breakouts within the session as well.
And then we talked to being able, Eric, to pull everyone back then maybe to a panel Q&A. So if you have, say, like a 2-hour event, you've got, you know, the beginning that is kind of like setting the stage that 5 and 5 go through this. You have your breakout sessions, then you bring everyone back for a Q&A to really go deeper, as opposed to just if you sat everyone down to have a generic Q&A, you literally wouldn't go very deep in the conversation of understanding how this affects everyone.
That's the, and look, hopefully I'm not calling anyone out here. It was one of my best friends ever in this industry, Hunter Lockman, who's the CMO with the Capitals and the Wizards. And we did a Wizards night. The thing is, with the Wizards, their night was driven by their corporate partner, who's MedStar. And MedStar wanted their doctor to be out front. And so we had a woman named Julie Donaldson. If anyone recognizes that name, she was with NBC Sports Washington. And then she became, with everything that went on kind of with the Washington football team, I know we don't call them the old name anymore. She took on a very senior level role there. But so it was a panel of myself, this doctor from MedStar, and then Julie asking questions. And in 30 minutes, when you're just going back and forth and saying, so what does mental health mean to you, right? And then you get the mic. Tell us who's the most affected, right? And then you get the mic. You're not really drawing people in. You're not educating, number one, and you're not making people feel like they're part of something that's growing. I'll juxtapose that. I'll give a big pat on the back to the Cavaliers we did an event with. So they did a food option prior to the event. So already they had tabling set up. So those core groups that we were talking about, the NAMIs, the Mental Health Americas, the Bring Change to Mind, they bought enough tickets to have tables at the pregame event. They then had food set up so that people, as they were getting their food, were able to kind of go around to the tables while that was going on. And then during our main session, which is that 2-hour session, when we did the breakouts, then we came back together, you guys can sell a spot in the panel that we do organize within the context of the larger thing. Now that the panel is just a piece of it and not the whole thing, you can make that a certain minimum ticket threshold. So you can say, you know, to a group that does 50 tickets or more, we've got a spot on the panel discussion portion, which is going to be 20 minutes of this 2-hour larger event that we're going to have prior to the game.
Perfect. So I think the concept it comes back to, you know, partner with Eric and his team to build the content, because he's the experts, we're not. You know, dive into some breakout sessions, and you know, you don't have to do all of the breakout sessions, and maybe you want to just have one focus for 1 year and then do another focus even another time a year or the next year. You know, doing some tabling and maximizing opportunity with ticket minimums for tabling, doing a Q&A and maximizing the opportunity with panelists for the Q&A. And then talk about, Eric, like from a fan experience perspective. And I know that that's a touchy subject because everyone doesn't know necessarily what's going to happen with fan experiences, but there are things that we've talked about that you can do. But what have you guys done from a fan experience perspective in the markets that you've worked with that have created something special to kind of close out the night?
Yeah, so even before going into that, I just want to add one other group target that's a possibility. And again, I see Allie, so hopefully she's smiling as I say this, but outside of the core traditional groups, if there's ever a time to use these group sales vehicles that you guys all use from a technology standpoint, okay, I'm being program agnostic here, is that to be able to get those tools out and double dip on your existing groups, if there's ever a night to go back to those people, and we'll help you with the messaging, to say, look, I know you're bringing 300 people out to that Spanish Heritage American night, or that, you know, that church night that we're having, but we're doing this night around how social emotional health impacts all of us. Even if it's 5 people from your group, I think this is an important theme for your group to come out to, because we're doing a whole educational series for 2 hours before it. I think it's a great way to double dip and get some of those folks. Now you start to think about the groups of 200s and 400s who are just bringing a 5 here, a 10 there, a 20 here. It adds on to those core groups that you have and the focus school and office groups that we were talking about before. In terms of fan experiences, so one of the unique things what we do is, and I could send you all pictures of this, is when we take a picture as a group, we've got this sign language sign, same here, it looks like this. And as a keepsake to the group leaders, what we've done is we've either all gone on the court after the game to take that picture together, or in some cases been able to bring a player down. And this is where the ops group really appreciates it, that we're not asking the player to have to sit and answer questions. We're not asking the player to have to interact and liaise as much. But when you all of a sudden are taking that group picture, you're from this school, another school is there, or another Mental Health America group is there with a NAMI group. You're all together. And then all of a sudden you see, you know, I'll use an example, Kelly Oubre from the Suns, who's shared his stories and mental health challenges that he's been through. We come at it from the angle of not, again, disorder. So it's usually pretty simple to be able, stuff like that. You know, that's off the court. And we, in that particular event with the Cavaliers, the gentleman who's really tall in the back there, that guy right there, his name is Lance Allred. So you find these little gems here and there. Lance works with our group. He was the first deaf NBA player, and he happened to have gotten his first chance to play, even though he was 11 or 12th man on the bench. He went to Utah under Rick Majerus and then transferred to Weber State. He came and he spoke at that event, right? So it was a nice way to engage the fans. They had someone who was coming out that was part of the team. And so us being able to kind of reach into the contacts and the relationships that we have to be able to bring additional people on who, you know, look, it's not going to be Michael Phelps, unfortunately, just because I don't think any of us have the budget for something like that. But, you know, to get these players who are in market, former players, personalities who out of the goodness of their heart want to do stuff to help educate people and do it for nothing, there's a good number of them out there that we can reach out to, market dependent. And then probably we should talk about, Denise, I don't know if you have the pictures there, but one of the cool things that I think motivated a lot of people in Zach's case with the tickets that we sold is the co-branded shirts. So I'm gonna give a little bit of a geeky part of my childhood. Like many of us grew up getting those, like, I went to David's bar mitzvah, right? And like, you never want to wear that shirt ever again because you're like, it's comfortable, but it says David's bar mitzvah across the top. Looks kind of weird. So here's an example. Cavaliers, you just do it wine and gold, and we did it in the team colors. But for other teams where we've done it together, we've done it co-branded so that the logos are together. And so you actually see the team logo with the same tier logo, and it's not saying Mental Health Awareness Night on it, right? It's not something that they're taking back and being like, oh, it's like one of those typical theme nights. It's more something that they wear with pride because they appreciate both the logos on there, and it doesn't seem like that kind of hokey dokey giveaway that they normally get.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of given you a lot of pieces to the puzzle of how these nights work. I'm curious from your perspective, what questions do you have for Eric? What questions do you have for me? What kinds of, you know, success have you had in your own market? Anything we've missed that you've done and had great success with? Jordan, I know you've had a successful night in Dallas. So any questions or comments or thoughts? Go ahead, Thomas.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
What's up, Thomas?
I'm good. I'm also with the Florida Panthers as well. I'm the director of group sales over here. So I've heard a lot about you back in the day. So it's great to finally connect with you in this space, without a doubt. So during the summer, and this is something that I talked about over and over with my team. During the summer, we challenge each other to split up our teams in different categories, and we had like what we call a task force, right? So we had about 5 or 6 different categories, whether it be healthcare, whether it be healthcare, finance, whatever the case may be, education. So in the process of doing that, one of the associations that we came across was the mental health space, right? So with the mental health space, we figured, why not find a way to work smarter and not work harder, right? So in the process of doing that, Eric, we came across like you mentioned before, partnering with different associations. So we came across the State of Florida Mental Health Councils Association. We had several conversations with them during the summer. And what we basically told them is, hey, if we gave you the keys to the arena for one day, what would that day look like for your association? So at the end of the day, to make a long story short, at the end of the day, what we ended up doing is that we took their standing event that they were having at the Orlando County Convention Center, which is one of the largest convention centers in the country. We convinced them to take it from there and bring it to the BB&T Center. So we didn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. but without a doubt, we're going to sort of like pantherize it, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
So now we're going to have an event. Hopefully, once we get back to whatever normal looks like, we're going to have an event where they're going to bring in anywhere from 400 to about 700 attendees for this event, right? So what the event is going to look like is pretty much their standing event that they've always done. And what I'm going to do on my end is partner up with some of the South Florida influencers that we have connections with, whether it be a former athlete. We're also going to invite different universities, like School of Mental Health, for example. And then when you think about March, for example, March is actually Social Workers Appreciation Week, right? So you have different outliers, if you will, that you could combine the two. We have mental health, Social Workers Appreciation Week, also include the psychiatric world as well, and then bring that all together. And then lastly, we could also reach out to different facilities like mental health facilities, drug rehab facilities. So now you encompass an event where you go from having 50 to 100 tickets now to potentially having, you know, anywhere from 400 to 800 tickets. So we're looking at having a speaking panel where we have a former athlete, we may have a dean from one of the local universities, School of Social Work. We're looking at having maybe the state of Florida attorney general to talk about maybe drug trafficking or human trafficking. So we want to invite the right speakers that would then attract the right people and the amount of people that you want to have in that space.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, so a couple of thoughts that kind of come to mind as you're saying that. One is obviously for anyone on this call, if there's an existing event that you're able to tap into and convince them to do it at your building, of course. I mean, I think that's group sales 101, and that's a great move on your guys' end to do that. Where I would kind of make sure that from a positioning standpoint, you have it in a certain way is the groups that you're describing to me, and a little bit divergent when you go to social workers, because I think that's a cool angle on it, is going back to this idea of where do you want to grow this thing over time, is if it's positioned too narrowly as this was a mental health event that was done before, we're inviting this group from this psychiatric association and from this mental health association, the people that you're going to get to come to it, the group is going to grow from, let's say, a 150 to a 450 to a 700 even potentially, which is a great night for anyone. Don't get me wrong, right? The challenge is, again, the marketing position of what the night's called. And then I'd also, with respect to the panel, instead of positioning as a panel, is can you have someone who starts the night off that allows there to be, and obviously this is whether or not the association that you're partnering with is open to this, but allows whoever that speaker is to be the person who lays a foundation for inclusivity for everyone who's in the room. So everyone feels like it's not just the mental health associations alone who are there. You're sending out a message, and I know Adeline does a great job with this on your social media side of things. You're educating your season ticket holders so that they're bringing friends out to an event like this. You're educating what I was talking about before with the other super groups from the existing groups that are coming out to this. I want to make sure that where we don't go down as an industry is mental health becomes this niche group when there's so much of an opportunity for mental health to become what cancer has become in these big stadiums, is to be able to say, we can get the 700s right now. Let's get them in right now. What does that chop us off from in terms of being able to educate the market on the bigger picture that's out there? So I love the base of what you're doing. The question is, how do you dress around?
Sure. So what we're looking at doing is trying to pivot it a little bit different in terms of providing them with a platform to network with other mental health experts in that field. So it's not just going to be maybe like a 1-2 hour event. It could potentially be a half-day event where college students could actually potentially get a job, network, shake hand, kiss babies, and at the same time you hear from industry experts. So it is going to be more zoomed in terms of mental health experts and professionals as opposed to health and wellness, if you will. I think health and wellness could actually be a different night that could pivot into potentially having, athletes and get into the whole yoga and get into vegan and make it more broad, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think if you do both, then you could possibly have 2 successful nights as well. I think that's great.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking your night's more of like an internal night, and maybe from that night, Thomas, you can pull some experts that do have a great following that could could bring it back to the same here focus that, hey, this actually affects everyone. Yes, we've got all these experts,
Sure.
but this affects everyone. I had a question posed directly to me that I wanted to throw out to you, Eric, and to the group. If you have an established mental health affiliation, like internally in your organization, how do you recommend leveraging that to create further awareness through other, channels of revenue? So if we've already got an established relationship, what's the best way to maximize that?
So can you give me an example of or an already like
So
only
this is
because I want to make sure I'm answering the question properly. Are you
Yeah.
saying we have an internal mental health brand as employees that we go, or are we having a relationship, kind of what I was describing with Washington, where MedStar is like our corporate partner related to
Yeah.
mental health?
So this one said mental health affiliation internally, like an example, Mind Check with the Vancouver Canucks.
Mind Chat. Okay. And I don't know if
Mind Check.
Kyle was up. Kyle was from the Canucks. I don't know if he was the one who was answering
Yep.
that question. So Kyle, do you mind just coming off mute for a second?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So give me a little more color on what that existing one already looks like.
So we've started a really strong, or I guess we had, my relationship with them is a little bit different now, but with Rick Rippon and the unfortunate circumstances that happened with him, we internally as an organization had started a group called Mind Check to bring further awareness about mental wellness and health. And I mean, as you're aware, Tyler Mott's gone on to speak as a player that's on the current roster about things like that. So we've done things that in partnership with the NHL, as well as just kind of us internally, and just trying to find out how best do you take a relationship like that and then evolve it into something that's bigger without having kind of competing interests, as it were.
Yeah, Kyle, like, so using Mind Check as an example, right? And it goes kind of what Thomas was talking about in that potential second night, right? I'll take this out of sports completely, and then I'll bring it back into sports, and hopefully it'll help paint the picture. My mind thinks very much to branding, right? And so there's an advocate that I work with whose name is Kevin Hines. You guys might have seen his story. He's the guy who survived the jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. Pretty incredible, amazing story, right? Now his brand is Be Here Tomorrow, which is an incredibly strong brand, right? It's because it's for suicide prevention, right? When we've done events together, we've combined it, right? So it's same here, meaning we all go through something, Be Here Tomorrow. We never get into the semantics of like, who's the sub brand, who's the main brand, right? The reason I bring that up and the reason I started the conversation at the top of the hour that we had is not leading with Mental Health Awareness Night as the main name of the night, is within what you all are doing or had been doing, Kyle, with the Canucks, is that particular brand, and say it again, just because I want everyone to hear it.
Mind Check.
Right? So when you hear Mind Check, right, what does your mind go to? Mental health, right? Mind and check, right? So there's a piece of it which keeps it a little bit narrow because it's checking on your mind, right? Which is what we want there to be, but I'd certainly say it's a stronger brand than calling it mental health awareness, right? So within Mind Check, the thing is what Same Here does, and it's not so different from what we'll do with schools that we work with, is Same Here allows you to have the brand that shows it's 5 and 5 and it's for every one of our fans. Within 5 and 5, now it's Mind Check. It's how am I working on what's going on with my brain health, right? So I don't ever think of brands necessarily, unless you have too many that are involved, as competing with one another. I think of them more as being complementary to one another, as long as they're not saying the exact same thing. And in this space, there's enough of slightly divergent messages where you could keep the core of your brand, keep it at the top, but then use a message like ours or another organizations to say, how do we make this so that it's applicable to everyone that's in our market? Kyle, I hope that helped answer your question a little bit. Or did you want me to go a little more in the X's and O's specifically?
No, that's great. I mean, I think, with an established group like that, you just want to make sure that you're doing it, for lack of a better term, justice. And I think you can serve both purposes by, not really trying to compete with one another, but working in alignment with one another.
Yeah, and I'll take another step back, Kyle, is so one of the things that we do is we work with different athletes with platforms, right? So you know that we work with Theo Fleury, who's up in Calgary. When we started that affiliation with different athletes who do something mental health related, the message was never, hey, Theo, we want you to do away with your Breaking Free Foundation. Theo's foundation is called Breaking Free because he was sexually abused when he was younger, when he was a kid. So his brand is about breaking free from that abuse that he went through. The roll up in there for the different athletes that we work with, if his is about breaking free from sexual abuse and trauma, and Derek Anderson's brand is about the A-OK, right? I've been through things in my life, but I've been able to turn around and I'm A-OK right now, is being able to roll those brands up into something that connects them better so that they're all sharing about how all of us are in this together. So in none of those cases where we work with those athletes or those different organizations, do we take away their messaging. In fact, what we do is we use it to actually propel the existing message that they have. So actually, I appreciate that you brought that example up, Kyle. That's really helpful.
Thanks, Eric. That was great.
Are there questions or ideas, things that you've done in your market? Questions you have for Eric about your market?
My name's Adam. I'm with the Golden State Warriors. I'm actually working with Eric to set up our first mental health awareness night, though we're not going to call it that, here with the Golden State Warriors. And Allie's my counterpart down with Santa Cruz, so working with her on one. Just wanted to throw out an idea out too to everybody. Something that we're working on, knowing that FEPs are changing pretty significantly with contact interaction, especially here in the Bay. They're pretty hard on social distancing. So one thing that we're looking into is something I'm calling Artist Alley. So we have a brand new stadium. We've got a lot of really cool artwork in the building. And speaking to a lot of my contacts with mental health, there's a lot of really great art competitions. And that's usually a really hard category for me to bring out to games because art and sports are competitors, and they don't usually have a lot of crossover in terms of fans. So we're working with school districts who are going to be able to submit different art pieces, and the winners of the different art competitions are going to be featured in our arena. So hands-off FEP for us, a really good way to get a lot of different community groups involved, as well as actually broadcast what they're working on. So that's just one idea in case anyone else wants to try and replicate it.
You just gave me an idea, Adam. So I'm going to throw it out there. This is not now. I'm back in my element with my group salespeople. So I'm going to
might have the same idea you're thinking about.
Oh, let's see. Okay, so working with the Suns, we had these walls up in the second concourse that the arena had done already, where it was like a montage of Alvin Adams from back in the day, and it shows his stats, shows a big picture of him. Tying this to mental health in some way, just go with me on this idea. What if you had students submit their artwork for their favorite event that happened in team history that you could then hang up on the wall? So it's not just art related, it's also related to a social emotional time in their life where that was a pick-me-up for them. Now each of the students are walking around looking at, or fans for that matter, let alone students, you can open this up to anyone, but you allow them to display that around the arena. Then you could get a sponsor on it. I mean, we could go like so many different places with that, but I like the tie-in of creation, but also creation being related to a specific time in their life related to the team in some way. Denise, did I steal your idea, or you had
No, because then I was thinking about the concept of the shirts that you like to put into the night. So could you do a contest to design the shirt in a way, to your point, you want it to be something people want to wear again. Could you tie in art in some way? And maybe it is that same art that becomes either the back of the shirt or something like that. So
okay, so now I'm going to piggyback on your idea. So 2012.
This is great sales at its best.
Well, you're getting me back in my element. So 2012. So we know we have the technology there to do it. When we were going into the playoff run with the Devils, we had fans submit digital. They could either submit it digitally or they could upload it through their own hard artwork. And the winner got their design on the playoff rally towel for game one. So same type of thing is you could have a panel of folks. And this is the way you get a mental health association, Thomas, or anyone else involved, is they become the ones who judge. So you have a panel, and to make it exciting, it's one former player with these other, mental health advocates, gurus, experts or so, and then people can submit their artwork. You partner with your social media group to get the message out there. That's a way to get the rest of the fans outside of the groups to find out about this night, and you're going to be able to create the giveaway item that goes on the t-shirt or what have you that night for your wellness night. I think that's pretty cool.
Question for you, Eric. Have you had any teams host yoga on the quarter field in conjunction with this type of a night? And what are your thoughts on doing something like that? Could this be a marriage of those two types of theme nights?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we talk about when we do our 2-hour session, which again can be an hour, right? And then you could incorporate the yoga into it, is, and I'll send a link that you could forward around, Denise, when you're done with everyone. So what are people looking for when they're going to a night like this? If we're positioning it as something other than mental illness and it's mental health, they're looking for, how do I feel better? That's, at the end of the day, it's, how do I feel better? I'm going through shit right now. Or even if I'm not going through shit, I'm operating at 98%, but I want to operate at 100%, right? There's different levels. We call it a continuum that each of us are living at. So we call these exercises that we teach, we call them STAR exercises. And the reason we call them exercises and not practices is because exercises are things that we do physically for our body. We should have a gym for the brain the way that we have a gym for the body. So STAR stands for stress and trauma, active, release, and rewiring, okay? One of those STAR exercises is yoga. So whether it's we teach yoga or you bring in a yoga instructor, I help you find a yoga instructor. There's about 15 other things we could do together on the court, the ice, the field, whatever it is. There's Qigong meditation, there's havening, there's tapping, there's something called TRE, where you actually teach your body to tremble and release stress from your body through a trembling mechanism that all animals naturally have. We just don't typically know how to induce them. So back to that question, which is a great question, is I would think beyond just yoga by itself and think more broadly to, what are these exercises we could bring to people? So from a value add perspective, in terms of education, we're bringing them things where they want to keep coming back because they see what we're bringing them as not only this rally, rah, rah, we're all in this together, but these tangible things that they can take away with them that, holy shit, I did that practice and I've never done that before. And for doing it for 20 minutes, I feel even the slightest bit better. Wow, if I stick with that, that's something that I could put into my routine. That's such an awesome piece that they're going to leave with. I think of these nights more as what you as an organization are doing for the fans, where they feel a kinship with you in wanting to work with you moving forward because you gave them something, as opposed to it just being, oh, they gave us a great night, we want to come back because it's a great night. These are the nights where you really tug on their heartstrings because you're showing them we give a shit about you.
And they've got something tangible to take away, to continue moving forward. And this kind of goes to one of the things we talked about with Eric, is that, okay, how can we at Spinzo help? And so one of the things that we're committed to do is that any of the teams that work with us and do a Same Here night or a mental wellness night with us, we'll be able to have a widget pop up on your promotional page that actually link directly to some of this content on Eric's page that will, pull out onto the side of the promotion page and give them some of those key things that they can start doing, because you never know where you're going to catch someone in the process. That having that information on the promotion page may save someone. It may help someone that day. We can also make sure that that goes directly into the email with their, information about how they redeem their tickets. So it's constantly there and something that can stay with them. I know it's not a huge thing, but it's something that we can do in helping continue to spread the message. And to your point, have something that they feel like, okay, this actually touched me. This went beyond basketball or beyond hockey or beyond football or whatever our sport is. This is actually something that, is beyond that.
But Denise, I think I'm only talking up because we didn't have the tools when we sold this way, when it was 2007. That's just a blunt way of saying it. If we were lucky, if the creative services department made a flyer for us, right? And if not, we put together a PowerPoint that we hoped that we cut and pasted the pictures the right way, right? So if we're taking a night back to, I know I keep bringing it back to this cancer as our benchmark, but if we're taking a night that people are thinking about one way and we're trying to teach a market how to think about it another way, having these digital tools for people to be able to go in and for you all to be able to craft your messages in such a way so that outside of just clicking on the ticket link, which is what people are used to when we had just Group Manager through Ticketmaster back in the day, to actually be able to position to people, we'll help any team that's doing it work on the verbiage for it. And please, again, Denise has known me for a while. Even if you're not doing anything Same Here related, call me from a messaging standpoint. And if you just want help with the messaging so that it falls in the right ears when you're explaining to people, I care more about the cause. I care more about people being educated the right way than I do the theme and working directly with us all the time is we need to teach people beyond just kind of that one segment, right? And so if you've got tools that are like this, let's use them because I think that goes such a long way in terms of changing people's perception of what this topic means.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, you know, the more I think about it, right, the more you speak about it, the more I'm starting to, like, I get what you're saying and I love what you're doing. And I do believe that what makes this experience a little bit different is that there's definitely a feel good about this. And it's almost like a community service action, right? Like a community service campaign. And if we partner up with, like, let's say the city of Sunrise and partner up with different municipalities that's around the city, they could then say, hey, we're going to back you guys on this. This could be more than just a BB&T event. This could be a citywide event, and you could get the people that you want to get. In addition to that, I do believe that there's a way, maybe you could explain to me, Eric, or explain to us in terms of how can we use this opportunity to pivot with community relations department?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, absolutely. So Thomas, I love the fact that, and hopefully when you first presented to me what you said, you didn't feel at all like I was uncomfortable with it. I love the fact that you're building the base of what you're doing at the beginning, right?
No, it's complete. I do believe that you and I, we talk about there's two different nights without a doubt. So I could certainly appreciate that.
No, and the fact that like the light bulb eventually goes on when you hear it enough, right? Yeah. I have to sometimes check myself because I went from a situation where I didn't know what the hell mental health was. Right. And you're not talking that long ago. You're talking 4 or 5 years ago when I was in the offices that you're in, and all of a sudden the bottom fell out from underneath me. Sure. And then it took me going through it, being given all the wrong ways to heal, looking at the way our society talks about it and being like, no shit, why no one's getting better. No shit, why we're not, rallying together around this. It's because of the way our society positions it. So one, I appreciate that you kind of understood the rallying cry piece to it. In terms of community relations, Thomas, you are dead on. So I'll give you an example. When we got reached out to by Warner Brothers. Not that a movie studio has to be involved in it, but
no big deal. Just the Warner Brothers.
No. Look, it was definitely humbling. Don't get me wrong. So Ben Affleck was coming out with a movie that unfortunately COVID just stopped it in its tracks. This was the week that COVID came out. But the name of the movie, if you guys ever want to see a good movie on Netflix now, is called The Way Back, right? And it's all about Ben Affleck as a coach, and you thought it would be like a Hoosiers movie, and he actually goes from being a coach to he's drinking his sorrows away, and his way back at the end was not winning a title. It was him going to therapy, right? Like it like wows you at the end that's where but the reason I bring that up is because when we were in different markets for different teams, from a CR standpoint, we partnered with the different teams and we brought groups out to do movie screenings, pre-screenings before those movies came out, where we talked with an athlete that was in market about how their challenges that they've been through are either similar or different than the challenges that Ben's character was facing in the movie. That's just one microcosm example. It doesn't have to be around a movie, but that's just what came to mind is once I'm in market, or once any of us are in market, I work with Colombo a ton, right? And like having relationships at Parkland and places like that's the advantage, I think, of having been in this space for 3 years is I can call a community group and be like, hey, this community relations group with this team that we're doing an event with, and Adam and Allie, this is what I was saying to you guys, right? With Golden State is use the opportunity that you have if we're in a market and we have from a content standpoint to talk about these things. There's no reason why we can't go to a community center, why we can't go to a local school, why you can't make this a CRPR event also, where the community is bringing something outside. It also then leads towards a promotion of people buying tickets to the night later on, 2 or 3 days later after that. So hopefully, I know, Thomas, I just said a lot, but the main way to bring that together is to say, from a content perspective, in terms of us presenting, us doing kind of the star exercises, and then bringing out another. I mean, if I was able to get Sean Thornton to speak up in a company meeting about him being nervous when he got out on the ice, which was crazy to hear him say that. being able to bring out people with platforms and to be able to do that in the community and partner with the community relations groups, that's absolutely something we want to do.
Right. And lastly, I do believe that by doing something like this, it does change. So like the perception of the organization to the community, right? Like we're not just here to sell tickets, but we are actually partners of the South Florida community, or wherever you're from, the LA or whatever the case may be.
You nailed it. That's exactly it. And again, I don't know if the Suns are still on the call because it's hard with seeing all the different names that are on there. But Thomas, it's the same thing that I said to the Suns. Everyone's building situation is different, right?
Yeah.
But in the Sun, having worked there before, in the Suns, the arena is financed by the city. And so that was one of the things I was saying to the Suns. Like, it's one thing for us to do things for fans that are group sales related. You just got approval on the refurbishment of your building that's been around since 1993, but they put millions of dollars into the building. Here's a way to give back to the community and do more events where you invite people into that building that they just helped you refurbish or in the middle of refurbishing. And we do and invite everyone from the community out, or you invite these specific groups, or we go to their location, but you're showing yourself as a good community partner on top of it just being that it's a group sales night.
Cool. Good stuff.
Love it.
Thanks for those questions, man.
Other questions for Eric before we close this session out? No? If there aren't any other questions, Emmanuel's going to post in the chat our recap document. So your playbook with all of the details. It's up there. You can click on that and download it. It's a PDF. It'll be on ticketplaybook.com here later this week as well as the recording of this. It has on there every possible way to get a hold of Eric, right? So whether you like to DM him on Instagram, connect with him on LinkedIn, send him an email, you can get a hold of Eric. Eric definitely wants to work with each and every one of you and get the message out. So any final words or thoughts, Eric, that you want to throw out there?
I want it to be a rallying cry for everyone who's here that, and Thomas, I'm sorry I keep going back to you, but you've been the vocal one.
No, it's all good.
Is to have this the same way I described the chip on my shoulder about being a group salesperson, and that we should be able to be VPs of sales and take on larger responsibilities. I think we should have a chip on our shoulders as group salespeople that we can be the relationship people in market with community relations. We can be the people who help the market, especially at a time when COVID happened and there's all these questions about fans coming back and can't they come back and all that stuff. For us to be the champions internally in our organization, to take a topic, and maybe I have this myopic view because I lived through it, but to take a topic that I think is the pandemic of our time, which is something that we don't talk about enough, but you're seeing more and more people start to come out and talk about it, and to work together. I don't mean with me, I mean you guys on this call, all your different teams, to hold hands and say, how do we raise this conversation to another level so that we're helping educate the market in a place where funding is not going to schools. It's not going to community groups to talk about this. We have a chance to actually do this with our fans. I think that's a pretty awesome thing to be a part of. So hopefully that rallying cry makes you feel a part of this, whatever this is, more so than just saying, I'm going to do a group night.
I'll tell you what, though, you brought up a good point, because mental health is still considered a taboo in most communities, right? Where there are mental issues that an individual may be experiencing, depending on where you're from, your parents may just say, you know what, let's just go to church. No, church doesn't solve all the problems, right? But yeah, so it's good to know that it can be used as a tool to provide awareness in all communities.
Thomas, what you just shared, I'll give a quick little anecdote since we got 1 minute to go here, is so I do these presentations at school all the time. And after I share pretty vulnerably the story of what I'd been through, and I had a teacher come up to me, it was only one time, but it gave me an insight in terms of how different communities think about this. And she said, Eric, do you want me to pray with you? I think you went through what you went through because you didn't have enough faith. I didn't even talk about whether I had faith or not, whether I was using my religion during my time or what. But in her mind, because I'd gone through that, it had to happen because I wasn't being faithful, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting way to see it through different people's perspectives, is that we look at it, we're like, yeah, of course we're all impacted. How could we not be? Not everyone else sees it that way.
No.
Very good point. Very, very good point. Well, thank you, Eric, so much for being on this call and for helping build this playbook. I know you're going to help a ton of teams and we're going to get the message out. And we couldn't be more excited at Spinzo to help be that voice to share the message. So however else we can help as you start building and planning nights like these, or whatever we can do to help spread the message, we are fully committed to do that as well. So thank you everyone for joining, and we will talk soon. Next week, we'll be back for, we're going to talk college nights. So we have a former sports executive who now sits at a college, who actually was a group leader this past season with the Detroit Red Wings. And he's going to help bring his experiences to, the ins and outs of college nights and who you can work with. So that's next week. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Eric.
See you later, Eric.